This beautiful lady is this season's female contestant, Kelly, who is 25 years old. The male contestant is 40-year-old Tom, a family-oriented retired veteran. He joined the competition to set an example for his children. Kelly is also a veteran, formerly a Marine, and currently works as a part-time model. Kelly and Tom will be dropped on the west bank of the Matuk River, located in the densest jungle in southern Cambodia. The area is hot and humid, home to various spiders, venomous snakes, and fierce crocodiles in the river. Upon arriving at the competition site, the contestants strip down to face each other naked. Despite their gentle appearances, it's surprising that they don't argue. Kelly appears quite shy. Each contestant is allowed to bring one survival item. Tom brought flint and Kelly brought a machete. Let's take a look at the map. The first thing for Kelly and Tom is to find water and a place to stay overnight. Their best option is to head inland, through the snake-infested jungle, to a tributary in this area. Before the challenge, experts evaluated the contestants based on skills, experience, and psychological aspects, assigning them a preliminary survival rating, PSR. Both contestants scored points for their military backgrounds. Tom, a former officer with leadership experience, scored 6.6. Kelly, strong-willed with a comprehensive set of survival skills, scored 6.4. The scores are not high due to their lack of wilderness survival experience. Experts mentioned that Tom's leadership might not be advantageous, as all the female contestants are strong-willed and opinionated. If Tom insists on being a leader, it might not be beneficial. At the start of the challenge, they both had a reasonably good impression of each other. The Cambodian jungle is home to over 30 types of snakes, including the formidable king cobra, which can grow up to 5.5 meters long and move its head at speeds up to 80 kilometers per hour. At 2 p.m., the pair found a flowing stream and a clear rocky area, ideal for building a shelter. Nearby bamboo and vines make excellent materials for construction. However, nights in Cambodia can be very cold without clothing, and the best course of action is to start a fire quickly. Tom successfully started a fire, but it was still very cold sleeping in the unfinished shelter. Kelly wanted to cuddle with Tom for warmth, but he kept his distance, refusing to embrace anyone other than his wife, a decision that speaks to his character but left Kelly very cold. She just wanted to warm up, as the nights here are unbearably cold. Tom's refusal to share body heat seemed absurd. This show has made it clear. Those who start off struggling might end up doing well, while those who seem to have a smooth start face continuous trouble from day one. Some contestants struggled terribly without fire, while others, even with fire, suffer immensely. The next day, Kelly was still fearful of the night's cold. Tom made it clear to her that he feared his wife getting angry, so they could not get close. This added an invisible distance between two strangers. Who do you think is to blame here? Nearby bamboo makes a great container for boiling water. Once the water boils, it's safe to drink. Both contestants are energetic and should be out hunting and gathering food. But since making fire, their progress has slowed. They just improve their shelter and drink hot water every day. Kelly is restless. She doesn't want to spend 21 days near the shelter starving. She wants to explore and forage, not return home and tell friends she just sat on a rock for 21 days. Kelly is full of ideas, but Tom seems indifferent. He prefers to stay in familiar areas, but brother, no food means even familiar places are no good. This caused a disagreement. Kelly didn't care and went out alone. Before she left, Tom asked her to bring back some firewood. After exploring alone for a while, Kelly reached a small river cove. Though the scenery was nice and open, it was very dangerous with crocodiles nearby. Kelly caught many clams there and returned happily to share with Tom, who did not care and remained upset. When he saw the clams, he wasn't happy and asked about the firewood Kelly had forgotten, focused only on finding food. If I were Kelly, I'd be angry too. I bring back food and you're ungrateful, blaming me for not bringing firewood. What were you doing at home? During the clam roasting, Tom kept instructing Kelly on what to do. Kelly couldn't take it anymore and sat down to talk with Tom. Communication didn't solve the problem, it only worsened it. I wanted to see you display some survival skills, Tom said. I haven't seen any. And you tell me you could build the shelter yourself. I could tear it down, and you can try making it again to see how it turns out. Besides chopping bamboo and collecting wood, what else can you do? Let me analyze this. Tom wants to survive in his own way, which is to barely survive for 21 days. This method has its merits but is too risky without food, and loses the meaning of the challenge. When Kelly confronts Tom, he responds by saying, "I made the fire. I built the shelter. Isn't that enough?" Neither wants to compromise. On day 8, they cooperated to collect clams together. However, they ended up arguing over a trivial matter on the way back. Eventually, they each did their own work, with one working while the other lay around, never offering any help. This mutual anger only left them hungrier. By day 18, Tom finally compromised a bit. He volunteered to go out and find clams to eat. This time, however, Kelly chose to stay and gather firewood. Tom brought back 7 clams, 2 of which were dead. After starving for many days, a few small clams were hardly enough to eat. By now, the challenge was nearly complete, but they were close to failing. On the final day, day 21, they should have left early for the rescue location. Instead, they waited for the water in the bamboo to boil. While waiting, Kelly nearly burned her hands boiling water, and Tom just watched without helping. Frustrated, Kelly walked away. Tom had to search for her for quite a while, which was risky. The helicopter had to return to base before dark, and it was already afternoon when they finally set off. They took a wrong turn because they didn't check the map, but fortunately the helicopter kept searching and eventually rescued them. Although Kelly and Tom completed the challenge, their poor performance significantly lowered their primitive skills scores. Kelly's score dropped from 6.4 to 4.8, and Tom's from 6.6 to 5.4. It was the first time I saw scores drop so much in a successful challenge. Why bother arguing so much? It's a bad example for children watching the show. After the show, Kelly returned to her modeling career at home, and Tom went home to recuperate. Today, our focus shifts to a deserted island in Dominica, where the new female contestant, Colin, 32, from California, an extreme sports athlete and nutritionist, appears. Colin has always loved outdoor survival and is a skilled obstacle racer, very confident in her mental toughness. The male contestant, Chris, 38, a commercial fisherman and former Marine, has learned survival skills from a young age, especially during his 4 years in the Marines. His most confident survival skill is making fire using primitive methods, claiming he can successfully start a fire within 1 to 2 hours. Upon arrival at the challenge site, the next step is to undress. Chris, confident in his physique and indifferent to being naked, also hoped for an attractive female partner. I wouldn't say Chris is lecherous. At least he's honest about his thoughts. This is the American dream, you know? The only thing better would be 2 naked women. Okay, buddy. Let's end that fantasy there. Let's first see what survival tools each of you has brought. Each contestant is allowed to carry 1 item. Colin brought a cooking pot, and Chris brought a knife. Now let's look at the map. We are on an uninhabited island in Dominica, known for its sharp volcanic rock terrain. The narrow coastline is lined with steep cliffs, and the island is scarce in resources. The contestants can only risk entering the shallow sea areas to hunt, exposing them to various dangerous creatures: venomous sea urchins, highly aggressive bull sharks, and Portuguese man-o'-wars. A sting from a jellyfish can cause fever and shock. These are the dangers the contestants will face. In the initial phase of the challenge, the focus is of course on finding water and building shelters. They quickly found a water source by digging beside a riverbed to access relatively clean groundwater. While searching for a shelter, they hesitated continuously, debating between living in a cave or building a small tent. As the day was almost ending, they finally decided to build a shelter on an open piece of land by themselves. Before participating in the challenge, survival experts evaluated the contestants based on skill, experience, and psychological aspects, assigning them a primitive survival rating, PSR. Chris, with his extensive wilderness survival experience, received a PSR of 7.1, though his personality might clash with his partner. Colin, a competitive athlete but lacking wilderness survival experience, scored 6.1. The wind is strong here, so extra effort is needed in building the shelter. Once the shelter is built, they can rest. However, during the process, the two had their first disagreement. What happened? Colin had her own ideas for the shelter, which she shared with Chris. Chris didn't adopt any of her suggestions, thinking they were useless and would make the shelter very fragile. Chris likes to lead and is very direct. He believes in doing things his way without compromise, which would be perfect with a submissive partner, but that wouldn't be interesting. Despite her petite appearance, Colin is very strong-willed and independent. After Chris repeatedly refused to implement her suggestions, Colin, frustrated, went to the sea to bathe. They are both over 30, such a minor issue shouldn't be a big deal. Regardless, the shelter was eventually built. Colin woke up shivering from the cold late the next night. "It's really cold," she muttered. The wind was strong outside and it was impossible to stay warm without fire. Starting a fire is Chris's forte. He claimed he could get a fire going in 1 to 2 hours. If that's true, there wouldn't be any rush to start one today. Quietly, Colin asked, "What if the fire doesn't start, big brother?" Chris replied confidently, "It won't fail, trust me. Let's not rush the fire. We'll go get some food from the sea first." They then built a fishing trap together. After setting it up, Chris went deeper into the sea to place the trap. As a fisherman, it was uncertain how many fish Chris could catch over the 21 days. Later, they ate a sea urchin raw by the shore. "I've never tried sea urchin, it probably isn't tasty," said Colin. "Eating raw isn't a solution. Now it's finally time to start the fire. Chris, please begin your performance." Smoke appeared, but Chris's technique seemed off. The rope for his bow drill snapped before a fire started. It was an unexpected setback, or else they would have had a roaring fire by now. Colin scoffed from the side. "So much for the expert. It only takes an hour at home, but it doesn't work here. Let's try my method." Colin suggested the fire saw method. "I think this method might be worse than the bow drill," Chris remarked. Despite their efforts, they failed to start a fire. Over the next few days, Colin tried multiple times without success. "Sister, some things need the right technique. Brute force won't work," Chris said. Failing to start a fire was a major setback for Colin. She broke down in tears on camera. "No food and the cold nights are too much for me," she cried. Colin had said she could handle and endure any situation, but in reality, she couldn't. The lack of fire gradually wore her down, and the empty fishing trap didn't help. Chris noticed Colin's negativity and wanted to communicate, but Colin refused to speak to him just because he hadn't started a fire. "Why can't you act like a man and get the fire going?" she lamented. A team should face difficulties together, not blame one person, Chris thought. Though he had boasted at the start, he was genuinely trying to start a fire and wasn't slacking or being negative. Colin, however, was too frustrated to communicate and even disappeared for a while. This was clearly not the way to handle the situation. On day 13, Colin could no longer endure hunger and the cold. She approached the show's producer, announced her withdrawal, and left the challenge. Now, only Chris remained. Chris was furious about his partner's sudden departure. He almost smashed the camera. Fortunately, a cameraman intervened. Channeling his anger into motivation, Chris crafted a new bow drill and quickly started a fire shortly after Colin left. On day 17, Chris caught a large crab. Cooking and eating it was incredibly satisfying. The crab provided Chris with the energy needed to complete the challenge. By day 21, he had to walk 3.2 kilometers along steep cliffside shores to reach the southern beach for rescue, marking his success. Due to difficulties with the rescue boat reaching the shore, Chris swam out to it, completing the challenge successfully. Colin lost 10 pounds over 13 days, and Chris lost 20 pounds in 21 days. Chris's rating increased from 7.1 to 7.9, while Colin's dropped from 6.1 to 4.9. Today's episode of Primitive Living 21 Days is set near the Himalayan region in Kumaon, northern India. The location is a hill covered with pine forests with cold air from the Himalayan glaciers, causing heavy rain below, leading to temperatures dropping below 10 degrees at night. Without clothes, the cold would be unbearable. The contestants face threats from Asian black bears, fierce leopards, and venomous saw-scaled vipers. This episode features male contestant Hajin, a 36-year-old martial arts expert and Iraq War veteran with extensive wilderness survival skills, proficient in fire-making, shelter building, and hunting. The female contestant is Fredeya, a 27-year-old survival expert who has lived a nomadic life with her father since childhood. Fredeya shared, "As a child, my father raised me in a communal, open-air environment. Nature is my home, and being naked in nature is nothing new to me. My only concern is the cold." The contestants arrived at the challenge site, facing the cold wind. They undressed and met each other. Each contestant could bring one survival item. Fredeya brought a lighter, and Hajin brought an axe. Starting from an altitude of 1,370 meters, Hajin and Fredeya needed to climb an additional 600 meters to reach a large canyon, set up camp, and find water sources. The higher they climbed, the thinner the air became, accelerating dehydration and making breathing more difficult. The first day involved mountain climbing, which proved to be extremely challenging. Fredeya had to stop halfway to rest. By 5 p.m., they had reached an altitude of 1950 meters, where they could proceed with their plans. They disagreed on whether to start a fire or build a shelter first. Fredeya, shivering from the cold, wanted to start a fire for warmth, but Hajin disagreed, believing that they could survive without fire for the night, but not without a shelter. Hajin felt that in wilderness survival, priority should be given to protecting oneself by building a shelter to stay safe from the dangers of the wild. After the shelter was constructed, Fredeya successfully started a fire with a flint. The first day ended smoothly as both critical tasks were completed. However, due to a lack of time during the day to gather sufficient wood, they barely slept at night, constantly worrying about the fire going out. The next day, Fredeya and Hajin followed a stream near their camp, hoping to find a drinkable water source. After a full day's search without success, Fredeya, weakened by dehydration, chose to drink directly from the stream flowing beneath the rocks. The stream water could contain bacteria or parasites, potentially causing dysentery and other fatal gastrointestinal diseases. It's difficult to find clean water in the wild, and boiling it before drinking is advisable. Despite not wanting to boil the water, Fredeya and Hajin traveled far, but Fredeya eventually gave in and drank the stream water. Soon after, she was doubled over with severe stomach pain, vomiting, and suffering from diarrhea. Fredeya chose not to quit, but persevered. During this time, Hajin didn't complain, but took care of Fredeya while maintaining their survival. Continuing this way, they likely wouldn't last the 21 days. Fredeya's quick recovery was crucial for the success of the 21-day challenge. Before the competition, experts rated the contestants based on skills, experience, and psychology. Hajin, with military experience, scored 6.8, while Fredeya scored 6.2. Hajin's score might seem low, but Fredeya's could drop significantly due to her unsafe drinking choice. Now, it was about completing the challenge. After 3 days of vomiting and diarrhea, Fredeya suffered greatly both physically and mentally. As a tough woman who wanted to excel in the wilderness, she really didn't want to give up. Fortunately, her teammate Hajin, with his military background, wouldn't easily abandon a comrade. Using sand and stones from the riverbed, Hajin filtered the stream water for Fredeya to drink. Due to severe dehydration from vomiting and diarrhea, Fredeya urgently needed to replenish her fluids. There might not be suitable containers nearby to store water, raising the question of why they didn't just boil some water to drink. Regardless, Hajin proved to be a supportive partner. After a while, Fredeya felt somewhat better. At that time, Hajin was rebuilding the shelter. Fredeya, puzzled and somewhat annoyed, asked Hajin, "Why are you building the shelter again? Have you gathered enough wood for the fire tonight? It gets very cold, and the fire always goes out by midnight. I keep waking up freezing." Hajin believed it was okay if the fire went out. "Worrying about the fire all night is the real mistake," he said. Hajin was the only one working and couldn't do everything. "Fredeya, please don't complain. The rebuilt shelter looks very warm." On the 4th day of the challenge, Fredeya was still curled up in pain. Hajin called the doctor, and the production team began assessing her condition. Fredeya had contracted dysentery but didn't need hospital treatment. She could continue if she wished, supported by her teammate. Despite this, Hajin suggested, "I think you should withdraw. Your condition is severe, and since you've been down, you can't do anything. It's hard enough for me to survive, let alone take care of another." Fredeya, a strong girl, didn't want to give up or admit defeat. Her perseverance was admirable. By the 8th day, she had recovered somewhat and even helped Hajin build a fireplace for warmth. After completing the fireplace, Fredeya caught a small crab in the creek, barely 40 grams of meat, providing only about 20 calories and 4 grams of protein each if shared. But it was better than nothing. By the 12th day, they had built a very sturdy shelter, enough to withstand the harsh nights of North India. However, their food supply was still meager, which wasn't surprising given the sparse resources near the mountains. There probably weren't any fish in the creek. Fredeya started eating earthworms raw, which were uncomfortable to swallow and got stuck in her throat. On the 15th day, Fredeya found a dead bird in the creek, a red-billed blue magpie. Although there wasn't much meat, it was enough for them. The cause of the bird's death was unknown, and it might have carried diseases like avian flu or encephalitis. But for two extremely hungry people, not eating it was not an option. They took the bird back, cooked it, and shared the meat. Eating meat was certainly better than eating earthworms. I'm getting hungry now. I'll buy a chicken leg for dinner. In the previous episodes, every team essentially survived on an empty stomach, and this season's contestants were no exception. After they finished the bird, it seemed unlikely there would be another meal during the challenge. However, Hajin's shelter was exceptionally well built. It wasn't just a simple hut. It was a structured wooden cabin with a small fireplace. Staying inside by the fire during the rain really made them fearless. The final stage of the competition was evacuation. They needed to descend 600 meters and travel approximately 8 kilometers, then cross a dangerous stream to reach the road below. Just at this crucial moment, Fredea's dysentery flared up again. Hajin almost thought he would have to carry Fredea out, but her strength surprised him. Despite abdominal pain, she walked ahead of Hajin and ultimately completed the challenge. Fredea truly pushed her physical limits. Interestingly, the van that picked them up was loaded with many chickens, making them crave chicken legs for their return meal. After a tough 21-day challenge, Fredea lost 20 kilograms, and Hajin, who never complained, lost 36 kilograms. He was indeed a great teammate. Now let's look at the survival scores. Hajin went from 6.8 to 7.4, and Fredea from 6.2 to 6.9. It's curious how the experts rated them. Perhaps they thought Hajin's lower score was due to less hunting. A score of 7.4 does seem a bit low. Today's episode of Primitive Survival for 21 Days takes place in the swamps of Louisiana, home to over 1 million American alligators and 6 types of venomous snakes, including the deadly cottonmouth that feeds on fish in the water. If surviving in the rainforest is tough, this swamp is a real killer. Let's see how today's contestants perform. The male contestant, Billy, 39, is an outdoor travel writer and primitive survival skills expert, skilled in using primitive weapons to hunt. Swamps are Billy's least familiar environment, and he is not very confident about this challenge. The female contestant, Kate, is a stunt actress. Her job has taught her how to overcome various challenging situations. Before even reaching the challenge site, the contestants saw alligators swimming nearby. Stepping into murky water without clothes must be terrifying. After undressing, the contestants faced each other naked in the river water. It's awkward now, but best to keep it brief as staying here is too dangerous. Each contestant is allowed to bring one survival item. Kate brought flint, and Billy brought a knife. Let's take a look at the map of this area. Kelly and Billy have been left in a vast swamp with no clear landmarks around, so they need to set out quickly. They aim to find a higher ground in the densely vegetated swamp where they can camp and survive for 21 days. Their final task is to reach a deep water area teeming with ferocious crocodiles to await rescue. Before the challenge began, experts evaluated the contestants on skill, experience, and mental strength, giving them an initial survival rating known as PSR. Billy scored high on skills, but his mental resilience was considered weak. Kate is calm and methodical, but lacks survival skills. Billy scored 8.1 and Kate 6.3. The journey to their survival high ground was challenging. Without any warm-up, they plunged into the icy swamp waters. Despite Billy's strong appearance, he continuously complained about the cold and expressed fear of unknown dangers underwater, such as crocodiles and deadly snakes. A small alligator just over 1 meter long could potentially rip off a limb. Amidst this, Billy heard a crocodile nearby, chilling him to the bone. Using the sun for direction, Billy confirmed they were not going in circles. Soon, they found a barren island, the only high ground within several kilometers, offering very limited space for shelter. The swamp water was murky and smelly. With the temperature around 10 degrees and bad weather expected, Billy and Kate needed to build a sturdy and warm shelter quickly. Kate found a crucial survival item, a cooking pot, without which boiling water would have been a problem. While the island was elevated, water was everywhere, and snakes occasionally swam by. Luckily, Billy was skilled at catching snakes, turning them into food. He quickly subdued one, securing their dinner for the night. Billy also managed to start a fire with flint, showcasing his excellent hunting and fire-making skills, justifying his high score of 8.1. They enjoyed snake meat and broth that night. a comforting end to the day. However, the drop in temperature at night and the annoyance of mosquitoes made it tough for them. The next day, they decided to rebuild their shelter as the previous one was too flimsy and drafty. Billy gathered ironweed for bedding, while Kate, during her material collection, encountered a venomous cottonmouth snake at her feet. Billy, taking no chances, crafted a primitive spear and used it to kill the snake by piercing its head. Shortly after Billy killed the venomous snake, several cottonmouths appeared around them. Billy was scared and hesitated to act. It was time to gather wood to build a shelter, but the roaming snakes limited their movement, and there were also crocodiles to consider. Billy took a deep breath, grabbed his spear, and chased after the nearest snake. Instead of worrying about snake bites at night, he decided to take the initiative. With his excellent hunting skills, Billy caught 2 snakes today. A great start. However, the success didn't last long. On the 4th night, a heavy rainstorm hit, flooding the area around their shelter. Initially, the island was only 30 centimeters higher than the surrounding water, but now it was submerged. Starting a fire off the ground became their biggest challenge. Billy and Kate needed to build a platform high up to start a fire, and construct a sloping roof over it for protection. This made starting a fire much safer. By the 7th day, Billy's feet hurt badly from being soaked in the swamp's stagnant water for too long. Soaking can lead to trench foot, where skin gradually rots and peels off. Stepping on a thorn could quickly lead to severe infection. Since the water level rose, the snakes disappeared. Now the best food source was crayfish. They quickly made traps for catching crayfish and used their feet in the water to attract leeches as bait for the traps. But they caught no crayfish and lost much blood to leeches. On the 13th day, Billy couldn't stand it anymore and wanted to move. Based on his observations of the river's flow, he believed there was another high ground nearby. Initially, Kate didn't want to move because she doubted the existence of another high ground and was concerned about having to build a new shelter. Billy was decisive, saying they should either quit now or move. Though risky, Billy's decision was right. The journey to relocate was fraught with dangers as they walked through deep water in a vast swamp. Billy doubted his decision at one point, but fortunately, luck was on their side. They found a dry, elevated land, bringing immense relief from the swamp. From day 15 to 17, they built a shelter. During this time, they caught a beaver. The beaver was sizable. After eating the meat, they could use its skin for clothing. Everything started going smoothly again. The final stage of the challenge was to reach the rescue point. The water near the rescue area was very deep. They hoped not to encounter crocodiles or venomous snakes along the way. Billy built 2 shelters over 21 days and had no strength left to catch snakes. Alligators, which can swim up to 32 kilometers per hour, hunt in deeper waters of the swamp. They float on the surface and silently dive to attack prey. Therefore, both contestants had to be very careful. Ultimately, under the watchful eyes of crocodiles, Billy and Kate completed the 21-day challenge. During this time, Kate lost 8 kilograms and Billy lost 19 kilograms, highlighting the hardships Billy endured. Although Kate did little, she stayed by Billy's side, encouraging and comforting him. Eventually, Billy's survival rating increased from 8.1 to 8.9, and Kate's from 6.3 to 7.7. Today's episode of Naked and Afraid was set in Brazil's Lagoa-Maranhenses National Park, which spans over 36,000 square kilometers of sand dunes. The contestants faced a harsh survival environment. The male contestant, Matt, 24 years old, a survival skills instructor and blacksmith, who is also a vegetarian, had a rebellious youth, starting marijuana in 5th grade and cocaine in 7th. Fortunately, he later straightened out and joined the competition to test his abilities. Observing the desolate sand dunes, Matt felt uncertain. The female contestant, Nora, 28 years old, a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner and extreme sports enthusiast, described herself as a wild child. Despite having blonde hair, Nora said she never did manicures or shaved her legs, likening herself to a man. Upon arriving at the challenge site, it was time to strip. When Matt took off his shirt, the fat on his belly was noticeable. Fat is not a hindrance in wilderness survival. In my view, it is the best survival tool. Both contestants today were wild and carefree about being naked. Nora mentioned she used to enjoy running naked in the rain. On these barren dunes, unprotected skin could quickly burn. After a brief interaction upon meeting, we looked at the survival items they brought. Matt had a machete he made himself, while Nora brought just a magnifying glass. Matt was initially puzzled, but then realized the magnifying glass could be used to start a fire. We no longer needed a map. Looking around, it was all sand and rainwater puddles. Under limited resources and exposed to intense heat, the challenge for the contestants was not just 21 days, but 504 hours or even 30,240 minutes. On their first day, Matt and Nora spent the entire day looking for a place to stay on the sand dunes. To avoid the strong desert winds, they moved to a lower level of the desert. There, like children building sandcastles, they piled up sand to block the wind. They slept on the sand that night. Before sleeping, Nora excitedly said she felt like a baby. However, by midnight, she was uncomfortable and felt as if bugs were biting her. The pain made her reluctant to call herself a baby anymore. It was still the first day, and Nora couldn't help but cry. Before the challenge, experts evaluated their skills and psychological readiness. Matt, a wilderness survival instructor with extensive experience in harsh environments, was rated 7.1, which seemed low despite the praise. Nora, with her clever mind, scored 7.6. Matt and Nora reached a densely vegetated area where they gathered materials to build a shelter. While chopping, Nora saw a group of ants and ate some without hesitation, offering some to Matt. Matt, a vegetarian, declined, stating he wouldn't eat insects. If he caught any animals, he would give all to Nora. They collected dry leaves before building the shelter. Matt suggested they drink some water first. Nora had found a small container, and they collected a bowl of water at a water hole. Nora then took out her magnifying glass. I thought she was going to use it to start a fire to boil the water, but she simply used it to heat the water in the container, moving the glass constantly to sterilize each part of the water. It was a way to treat the water, but Nora almost got sunburned in the process. Matt felt this was a waste of time and went to build the shelter without drinking. As a survival expert, Matt should know the importance of making fire. Since the beginning, they hadn't discussed making fire, perhaps because it was truly impossible on these sand dunes. There was no solid wood, and Nora had brought a magnifying glass instead of a flint. Matt was ready to drink directly from the pit. Nora's method of boiling water could burn her as well. Due to limited materials, Matt had to make full use of the terrain to make the shelter more stable and reliable. After much persuasion, Matt turned around and saw Nora still exposed on the sand dunes, using the magnifying glass to boil water. This method might sound impressive, but it's actually foolish because it requires constant exposure to the sun. Nora, have you considered that boiling water like this won't compensate for the water you lose during the process? Meanwhile, Matt collected some fruits and edible plants. In the evening, Matt drank water directly from the pit. By the third day, Nora was extremely weak. Despite this, she told the camera, "Matt is too reckless. Hasn't he seen how previous participants had to quit because they drank untreated water? Drinking unboiled, stagnant water is very dangerous." However, Nora did not consider the current situation. Matt remained energetic and even caught a large desert locust for Nora. It would have been delicious if roasted, but since they had no fire, Nora continued to cook the locust with her magnifying glass and ate it all. Here, I think Matt was kind to Nora, but the harsh environment began to affect Nora's mentality. She started to constantly complain about Matt, criticizing him for just sitting in the shelter and not searching for food. Eventually, Nora even resorted to verbal attacks, saying, "Sorry, but you are really stupid. I'm not the fat one here. Well, you stink. That's another thing. We are physically repulsive to each other. I realized from the first day you smelled really bad, even before you got dirty. Sleeping next to you at night, I had to hold back from vomiting. It's disgusting. As survival partners, there's no need to be so humiliating. Being fat doesn't mean you don't need to eat." In Nora's eyes, Matt was lazy whenever he paused. After being humiliated, Matt got angry, and the two fell into a cold war. Eventually, Nora took half the shelter materials to start over alone, declaring, "You do your 21 days, I'll do mine," as if they were getting a divorce. However, Nora soon realized that it's better to be with someone in the desolate dunes, especially since she only had a magnifying glass, and Matt had the machete. During the Cold War, Nora had a tough time until day 15 when their relationship began to improve. Nora found a coconut but couldn't open it without a knife, so she had to ask Matt for help. After drinking the coconut water, she apologized to Matt, who quickly forgave her. However, just an hour after reconciling, Nora fainted from severe dehydration and lost consciousness. Matt immediately called for a doctor who took Nora to the hospital for emergency treatment. She recovered, but the doctor decided she could no longer continue in the challenge. Now on day 17, with only 4 days left, it wasn't much for Matt. Due to his excess body fat, he managed to reach the extraction point after a long journey and completed the 21-day challenge by helicopter. Nora lost 16 pounds in 16 days, and Matt lost 26 pounds in 21 days. Matt's score increased from 7.1 to 7.7, while Nora's score decreased from 7.6 to 7.2. I am puzzled by Nora's exit. She could have lasted until the end with Matt, but she chose to struggle alone, boiling water under the sun with a magnifying glass. 3 days after the challenge ended, Matt returned the magnifying glass to Nora. This magnifying glass was very important to Nora as it was left to her by her recently deceased father. Today, we shift our focus to the southern Great Swamp in Florida, USA, which covers about 5,200 square kilometers. In this mysterious, otherworldly environment, elusive Florida panthers and venomous snakes roam. But the true rulers of this swamp are the fierce alligators, some measuring up to 4.6 meters long. Thinking about this, I am already sweating for today's 2 participants. Without further ado, let's welcome our 2 brave contestants. First up is the dashing female warrior, Amber, 31 years old, an Army instructor and mother of 2. Amber says her marriage is very happy and fulfilling. So why endure the hardships of the swamp? It turns out her military career has made her a survival expert, often grappling with alligators during training. Her goal in taking on this challenge is clear: to showcase her skills in hunting alligators. I admire her courage, but let's remember, this is a wild swamp where the alligators are fierce predators, not the tame creatures from a breeding farm. Next, we have Ryan, a 29-year-old male challenger and top hunter. Ryan was once a Marine, deployed multiple times to the front lines in Afghanistan and Iraq. After retiring, he went through a period of confusion and struggled with post-traumatic stress disorder. Fortunately, Ryan found his purpose in wilderness adventures. He says this challenge is to test his survival skills, and if successful, he plans to open a wilderness survival school. I have high hopes for both contestants today. Now, both have arrived at the challenge site. Wait a minute, Amber, you didn't have to dress up for the show. Okay, after both contestants stripped down, they faced each other naked in the swamp waters. After a brief awkward chat, let's see what survival equipment each brought. Amber brought a machete, and Ryan brought a fire starter. The contestants are almost entirely in a wetland covered by water. Their only chance of survival is to cross the dangerous swamp to find higher ground for camping. After determining their rough location on the map, they need to hurry and set off. If they don't leave soon, I'll be worried for them as the alligators are on their way. Ryan is particularly afraid of nearly 4-meter-long alligators due to their destructive power. While he was speaking, a cougar's roar was heard in the distance, unsettling both contestants and the cameraman. They looked at each other in panic, and Ryan let out a swear word. Damn it. There's no need to worry too much. After all, you only talked about how dangerous the alligators are without mentioning the cougar. Where's the cougar's respect? Florida panthers are an endangered species. Not much further, the contestants found a suitable high ground for setting up shelter and many large trees nearby to use for construction. At 4 p.m., thunder roared overhead. They quickly started a fire with a fire starter and then hurried to find leaves to build a roof. Just as they finished the roof, a heavy rain poured down. Don't rush to take shelter. Open your mouth wide to catch and drink the clean rainwater. Save some effort later for boiling it. They spent the first night in disarray due to the rain, which caused the surrounding water level to rise significantly, making it easy for alligators to come closer. At that moment, a 2.5-meter alligator, like a neighbor, came over and said hello. Before the challenge, experts gave both contestants a primitive survival rating. Ryan scored 7.9 due to his Marine Corps experience and expert hunting skills, and Amber scored 7.8. At the beginning of the episode, we knew Amber planned to hunt an alligator. So while Ryan tried to avoid them, Amber suddenly suggested catching and eating one, claiming she wasn't afraid because of her training. Ryan, incredulous, asked her to repeat herself, confirming he heard correctly. Amber indeed intended to kill an alligator, but Ryan refused, pointing out the countless alligators in the swamp. "I won't go on a suicide mission, and neither should you. If you leave, I'll be left to survive alone, and there'll be no one to keep warm at night. If we really must hunt an alligator, let's at least starve for 10 days first." Ryan was right. Such dangerous hunting is unnecessary. However, Amber seemed undeterred, mentioning that she had bathed there just 20 minutes ago, and now alligators were lurking in the water. On the second night, despite the fire, both were attacked by mosquitoes. Amber's legs were covered in large bites. By noon on the third day, Ryan had crafted a spear and stealthily entered the swamp. He targeted a large black fish and speared it decisively, catching a catfish. Ryan's hunting skills were beginning to show. If they could eat fish, there was no need to hunt alligators. On the 9th day, Ryan caught a large snake hidden in the bushes. After eating the snake meat, they used snail shells to boil water. Their survival was going well, with no worries about food or drink. However, as they got comfortable, they became careless, thinking they had adapted to the environment. Amber became irritable from the constant roaring of alligators, which was either to attract mates or to threaten intruders. At such times, vulnerable humans, especially those unclothed, should stay cautious. Yet Amber chose to approach the swamp alone, getting closer to the alligators. She remarked on the beauty of alligators and speculated on the taste of their meat. If you were competing with a female contestant who kept suggesting catching alligators for excitement, would you go? I definitely wouldn't. It's not about being cowardly. In reality, Amber lacked the skills to catch an alligator. She either wanted Ryan to join her or let Ryan catch it, since participating in this show was challenging. Ryan, being cautious, did not recklessly follow Amber into the water. When Amber was about to approach an alligator, she backed out, returning to shore and calling Ryan cowardly on camera. She then told Ryan to overcome his fear of alligators. Ryan quickly responded that he wasn't afraid of alligators. He just didn't want to take needless risks. Ryan was right, and I support his approach. Later, Amber realized her tone was inappropriate and apologized to Ryan, who was not a coward. On the 14th day, Ryan speared another large catfish, and they enjoyed another meal of grilled fish. It seemed like they were on vacation rather than surviving. Just when it seemed they would smoothly complete their 21-day challenge, Amber fell ill. She experienced severe abdominal pain, worsening rapidly. Ryan had to call a doctor who, after an initial examination, took Amber to the hospital for further tests to determine if it was dysentery or another bacterial infection. Amber was forced to leave on day 16. As she left, Ryan gave her a firm kiss on the face. For some reason, I was quite relieved to see Amber go. Otherwise, there might have actually been an accident. She was really too reckless, showing no fear of the crocodiles. After Amber left, I think Ryan's days became more comfortable. We have all witnessed his hunting skills. On day 18, Ryan made himself a small backpack and then crafted a 4-meter-long pole lasso to catch crocodiles. Ryan's change of mind about catching crocodiles wasn't just because he missed Amber. He wanted to prove to Amber and all of us that he was not afraid of crocodiles. Just as Ryan finished making the lasso, there was a splashing sound nearby in the water. Turning around, he saw a small crocodile, an excellent opportunity to catch one. Ryan found a good position, stealthily extended the pole lasso, and tightly secured the crocodile's head, controlling it. Good job, man, you've got something. But the crocodile was quite small, just over a meter long. I got excited for a moment, but a crocodile is a crocodile no matter the size. Just as Ryan was about to finish it off, the crocodile swung its tail and escaped, crawling into the bushes. "Ah, you little thing!" Ryan then showcased his top hunter skills. He charged after the crocodile with a machete and with one chop, collected the crocodile's head. With less than 3 days left in the competition, Ryan, if you can't finish eating, give some to the nearby cameraman. Don't waste food. Ryan also proved with his own skills what a master he is. 2 catfish, 1 snake, and 1 crocodile. His record is undeniable. After eating well and drinking plenty, Ryan carefully headed to the extraction point on day 21. On the way, he was very nervous, fearing revenge from the father of the crocodile he had killed. Fortunately, he completed the challenge without incident. Over these 21 days, Ryan lost 55 pounds, and Amber, who lasted 16 days, lost 22 pounds. Her score dropped from 7.8 to 7.4, while Ryan, with his superior survival skills, saw his score rise from 7.9 to 8.3. Very impressive indeed. Ryan is definitely one of the best on this show and fully capable of opening a wilderness survival school.